Hello everyone, what's going on? In this video, we are revisiting Quentin Tarantino's debut film, Reservoir Dogs. This movie is a testament to the idea that less is more. After writing several scripts, Tarantino set out to direct his own first film, which eventually turned out a masterpiece. Driven by great dialogue and brilliant characters, and not to mention the great acting, this film has made it quite high on the list of my favorite Tarantino films, and that is no easy competition. If you love the film as much as me, join us as we take you through 25 facts you maybe didn't know about Reservoir Dogs.
Come on, throw in a buck.
I don't tip.
You don't tip?
No, I don't believe in it.
The movie's budget was really tight, so they had the actors bring their own clothes, like Chris Penn's track jacket. The cool black suits were a gift from a designer who loved crime films. Steve Buscemi just wore his black jeans instead of fancy suit pants, and Michael Madsen mixed and matched different suits for his outfit. At first, Quentin Tarantino had his eye on the role of Mr. Pink, but he gave a fair shot to all the other actors who wanted to audition. When Steve Buscemi tried out for the part, Tarantino admitted he really wanted it for himself. He challenged Buscemi to give an outstanding audition if he wanted to snatch the role away, and Buscemi certainly stepped up to the challenge and he got the part for himself. To be honest, I'm glad it turned out this way, but let's not forget to appreciate Quentin's role as Mr. Brown. Many people have wondered why Quentin Tarantino made Mr. Orange confess to being a cop to Mr. White at the end of the movie. They argue that if he just stayed silent for another minute, he'd have been in the clear. Tarantino talks about this in the DVD commentary. Here he answers that those people truly didn't understand the movie if they were asking this question. He mentions that in all the Asian countries where the film was released, this question never came up. He explains that in Japan, they've got a word for it called jingi. While there's no direct English for it, it basically means that it was something Mr. Orange had to do as a man. Plus, he could only do it in those 60 seconds when Mr. White still had the opportunity to do whatever he deemed necessary. Mr. Blonde's Cadillac Coupe de Ville actually belonged to Michael Madsen, as they couldn't afford to rent a car for the character due to budget constraints. Interestingly, this very same car was also used in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when it was driven by the character Rick Dalton. Madonna, who is one of the main topics of the opening conversation, really liked the film, but disapproved Quentin Tarantino's interpretation of her song Like a Virgin. After meeting Quentin at a party while he was traveling in Europe for the film, she gave him a copy of her erotica album signed to Quentin, "It's not about dick, it's about love, Madonna." In an interview on the DVD, Michael Madsen mentioned that Kirk Baltz, the actor who plays Marvin Nash, asked to ride in his trunk to get a feel for the experience. Madsen agreed, but during the ride he saw it as an opportunity for his own character development. Madsen then drove down a bumpy alley with potholes, made a stop at a Taco Bell drive-thru, and finally returned Baltz to the parking lot before letting him out. A well-traded character development for both actors. Because of budget constraints, there wasn't enough money for police help with traffic control. So in the part where Steve Buscemi kicks a lady out of her car and takes off, it had to happen when the traffic lights were green. What is somewhat funny is that this movie is often included in top 10 heist movies lists, even though you never actually see the heist. In an interview on BBC in 2009, Quentin Tarantino said he was quite proud of achieving this. Initially, Tim Roth refused to read for the film. However, he did insist on going out drinking with Quentin Tarantino and Harvey Keitel. He ended up agreeing to read for them when they were all drunk. In the coffee scene, when the characters discuss tipping, we learn a lot about each character, which foreshadows their behavior later in the film. Firstly, when Joe is joking about shooting Mr. White, we can see Mr. Yellow grinning and does the finger gun towards him. Mr. Pink does only what is beneficial to him and doesn't tip the waitress. Mr. White is emotional and makes his decision based on this, even if it's just a tip. Finally, Mr. Orange snitched on Mr. Pink for not tipping, suggesting his is the rat. I think this is such a perfectly scripted scene. The film was released in America with almost no promotion, so it did not do that well at the box office. In England, however, it was a big deal. Quentin Tarantino couldn't even walk down the street in London without getting mobbed. British filmmakers have been influenced by it since. Mr. Blonde's real name is Vic Vega. This is the same surname as Vince from Pulp Fiction. Tarantino has revealed that Vic and Vince are brothers. He also planned to do a prequel to both movies called Double V Vega, which would star the Vega brothers, but Madsen and Travolta eventually got too old to reprise their roles, and Tarantino scrapped the idea. In Europe, the distributor took a unique approach for the release by using individual one-sheet posters for each main character, a tactic that was pretty groundbreaking back then and has since become a common practice. Quentin Tarantino initially planned to shoot the film with his friends on a $30,000 budget in 16mm black and white, with Lawrence Bender, the producer, playing a police officer chasing Mr. Pink. However, when Bender shared the script with his acting teacher, who then passed it on to Harvey Keitel, things took a turn. Impressed, Keitel not only signed on as a co-producer to ease funding, but also financed casting sessions in New York, where they discovered Steve Buscemi, Michael Madsen, and Tim Roth. With Keitel's support, they secured $1.5 million for the project. Mr. Orange's place was just upstairs in the same warehouse where most of the movie happens. They fixed it up to look like an apartment, saving money instead of looking for a real one. Tarantino had to battle with Harvey Weinstein, the head of Miramax, to keep the torture scene in the movie. Weinstein thought it would have a bad impact on the audience, but Tarantino stuck to his guns, and in the end, Weinstein gave in. Quentin Tarantino penned the initial draft of Reservoir Dogs in a quick 3.5 weeks, and the movie was filmed in just 35 days. Back in 2014, Quentin Tarantino shared in an interview that the whole soundtrack budget went into getting the song Stuck in the Middle with You for the film. Tarantino was fine with having just that song in the movie. The rest of the songs were only secured because the producers managed to strike a record deal for the soundtrack, even though they were aware that the plan might not have panned out. Quentin Tarantino tried to cast James Woods in the film, and even made him 5 different cash offers. However, Woods' agent turned down the offers without informing Woods, as they were considerably below his usual salary. When Tarantino and Woods eventually met, Woods found out about the offers and was irritated enough to switch agents. Tarantino didn't disclose which role he had in mind, only mentioning that the actor who played it was already outstanding. There's speculation that the role in question might have been Mr. Orange. One of the radio ads heard in the background is for Jack Rabbit Slims, the fictitious 1950s themed restaurant and home of the $5 milkshake that also featured in Pulp Fiction. During filming, a paramedic was kept on the set to make sure that Mr. Orange's amount of blood loss was kept consistent and realistic to that of a real gunshot victim. An additional note to Mr. Orange's blood scene: at several points, Tim Roth had lain in the pool of fake blood for so long that the blood dried out, and he had to be peeled off the floor, which took several minutes. Tarantino is known for his love of film and for using a lot of influences and homages in his movie making. He had a few influences for Reservoir Dogs, the primary of which was Kansas City Confidential. Additionally, the heist unfolds off-camera and the audience witnesses only the build-up and aftermath. Tarantino has later said he drew inspiration from films like Glengarry Glen Ross, where a similar approach was taken to depicting a robbery. And one last mention: the crew members use names referenced by colors, which is directly lifted from the original The Taking of Pelham 123, where the criminals do the same thing. Although Mr. Blonde supposedly killed more people than any of the other characters, he's never seen killing anyone on screen. In the commentary track on the True Romance DVD, Quentin Tarantino says that Tony Scott read both the True Romance and Reservoir Dogs scripts and told Tarantino he wanted to direct Reservoir Dogs. Tarantino told him he could have True Romance and that he himself was going to direct Reservoir Dogs. There you have it, 25 facts you now know about Reservoir Dogs. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to leave a comment if there are other facts we missed in this video. As usual, I round up with a random film recommendation. I just watched the film Living starring Bill Nighy. It's a British remake of the classic Japanese movie Ikiru, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Well, that's it for now. Talk to you in the next one.